Sabrina was stunned. Adults always said you should try to talk out your problems first. Aren't you supposed to tell me that fighting isn't the answer? She asked. Let's just pretend I did, Mr. Sheepshank continued, with a wink. Sabrina, I know being in the 6th grade isn't easy. There are lots of things that aren't fair, like a bully picking on you. It's natural human emotion to get angry. So what are you supposed to do? Bottle it up? Well, we all know what happens when you shake up a bottle of soda. It explodes all over the place when you open it. I think feelings are the same way. You gotta let them out when you're having them, or you're just going to explode later on. New Age psychobabble or not, Sabrina liked what Mr. Sheepshank was saying. She hadn't had an adult actually listen to her so well in a long time. In fact, he seemed almost eager to hear her thoughts. I think we'll forget all about this, the counselor continued. You've been sitting here for several hours and have had plenty of time to think about what happened. Sabrina got up from her seat, then paused and asked, Mr. Sheepshank, does it get any better? He laughed. I wish I could say it does, but don't worry. Someday this place will be nothing but an ancient memory. Sabrina looked out at the clock. School had been over for 5 minutes. Delphine would be waiting. I have to go meet my sister. Of course, Mr. Sheepshank said, but before you go, I just want to remind you that my door is always open. I'm a pretty good listener. Sabrina nodded. I'll see you tomorrow then, she said. I'm on the edge of my seat, the guidance counselor replied. The girl nodded and stepped into the hallway. Natalie, the bully, was waiting by some lockers. Her left eye had a black and purple bruise on it. When she spotted Sabrina, she turned and punched the locker door. The impact was so great, it dented the door badly. Happy with her handiwork, the big goon smiled, pointed at Sabrina, and shuffled down the hallway. Great, I've been here less than 8 hours, and I already have a mortal enemy, Sabrina thought. I wonder what Tuesday will be like. Don't worry, Sabrina. Tomorrow's a new day, a voice behind her said. Sabrina spun around and found the pretty blonde girl from her homeroom and gym class. That's what I'm worried about. The girl laughed. I'm Bella, she said. And don't worry, not everyone's like Natalie. Just then, Delphine rushed down the hallway to meet them. She had her coat and mittens on and a couple of books under her arm. I've had the greatest day of my entire life, she screamed as she hugged Sabrina tightly. We spent the first part of the morning making papier-mâché hats. Then, when the hats were dry, we put them on and learned about what kind of people might have worn them. I had George Washington's hat. The little girl paused to catch her breath. Delphine, this is Bella, Sabrina said, introducing the two. She's in my home room. You made a friend, Delphine said, giving her sister another hug. Oh, I'm so proud of you. Cute kid, Bella said, giggling. I gotta get going. See you tomorrow. Sabrina nodded and watched the girl disappear down the hallway. Maybe there was a chance of having a normal friend, after all. Did you know that George Washington didn't really have wooden teeth? It's a myth. Miss White said his teeth were made of ivory and bone, 'cause... Delphine paused and looked around. Then she cupped her hand around her sister's ear and finished her sentence. She actually knew him, but she didn't tell the class that. She just told me. Then Delphine pulled away and returned to her normal, excited tone. Then we learned all about chimpanzees. Did you know that chimpanzees aren't actually monkeys? I didn't know that. Chimpanzees are so punk rock. Punk rock? You know, cool. Where did you hear that? Sabrina laughed. Julie Melfi. She's in my class. She's very punk rock, her sister replied. That's stupid. You're stupid, Delphine shot back. And very unpunk-like. Unpunk rock. How was your day? Horrible, Sabrina grumbled. Come on, I have to go get my coat from my locker. It's upstairs. The girls climbed the steps to the second floor just as Toby came running down them. He nearly knocked them over. Out of the way, lightning bolt head, he shouted, then laughed his annoying little laugh. He ran past and disappeared down the hall. That kid is so un-punk rock, Sabrina thought. The sisters reached Sabrina's locker and she went to work on the combination. If there had been anything good about the day, it was that at least she had been assigned a locker near her homeroom. She wouldn't have to trudge through the halls in the morning with all of her books. What kind of class are you in? She asked as she peered through the window into Grumpner's room. What are you talking about? Sabrina said as she put on her coat and closed the locker. Look, her sister said, pointing to Sabrina's homeroom. Sabrina gazed through the window. The room looked as if a tornado had gone through. Desks and chairs had been tossed around. There was an odd white substance covering everything. She opened the door and the girl stepped inside. The white substance hung from the ceiling in strands like silky ribbon. It fluttered in the icy wind that blew in from a broken window. In the center of the room, a large sack of junk was suspended from the ceiling, slowly swaying in the breeze. Don't touch anything, Sabrina said, tugging at a strand that had attached itself to his coat. What's that thing hanging from the ceiling? Delphine asked as her sister crossed the room to look. Sabrina grabbed a nearby chair, pulled it close to the sack, and climbed onto the seat. Something's inside it, she said as she yanked at the layer of sticky stuff that formed the sack. Soon, something began to reveal itself from deep inside. Something with a face. It's Mr. Grumpner, she whispered. The man was as purple as an eggplant, and his once puffy face was gaunt and drained. He's dead. "Aw, man, that's so gross," Delphine cried unhappily. What could have done this, Sabrina wondered. Probably whoever left that, the girl said, pointing at the far end of the classroom. Sabrina turned to see what her sister was referring to. On the chalkboard was another horrible but familiar sight. Someone had dipped his or her hand into a can of paint and pressed it on the wall. The handprint was bright red. Chapter 4. The school doors flew open and a dark-haired man in a purple suit strutted in with his head in the air. He swaggered down the shiny hallway with a dwarf and an obese police officer bringing up the rear. When Sabrina spotted the group, she groaned. Mayor Charming was not one of her favorite people. To anyone else, Mayor Charming might have seemed like a run-of-the-mill politician. But Sabrina knew better. Mayor Charming was really Prince Charming, the dashing romantic hero of a dozen fairy tales. But, as Sabrina knew firsthand, Charming was only his name. The mayor could be obnoxious, rude, know-it-all, and had a particular disdain for Sabrina's family. In a nutshell, he hated the Grimms. Racing to keep up was Mr. Seven, the mayor's diminutive sidekick. Seven was actually one of the original seven dwarfs and acted as Charming's driver, assistant, and whipping boy. Behind him was Sheriff Hampstead, who did his best to keep up with the others while trying to hoist his pants up at the same time. So, let's go through this one more time, the mayor said to his followers with an air of condescension. Who's doing all the talking? You are, Hampstead and Mr. Seven said in unison. And why is that? Because we are numbskulls. See how easy that was? But what if I see something suspicious? I'm the sheriff after all, Hampstead argued. Charming came to a halt, spun around on his heels. Are you going to make me get out the idiot hat? 'Cause it sounds like somebody wants to wear the idiot hat. I don't, Mr. Stevens said. The sheriff frowned and shook his head. Good. Mayor Charming snapped. He took a deep breath and looked up at the ceiling, as if someone was watching from above. Okay, let's relax. Let out all the anger and frustration. You are a great mayor. Smile. Suddenly, a smile sprang to Charming's face, and he started down the hallway again. The mayor was a master at the phony, toothy grin, but it slid off his face when he spotted Sabrina and Delphine. What are they doing here? He moaned. They found the body, the sheriff explained. The Sisters Grimm found the body and no one told me? Charming said. You told us not to talk, Mr. Stevens said defensively. The mayor bit down on his lower lip and mumbled a variety of curse words Sabrina had never heard before. He reached into his pocket and took out a folded piece of paper and handed it to Mr. Stevens, who looked down at it and frowned. The dwarf unfolded it, revealing a pointy paper hat, and put it on his head. Someone had written idiot in big black letters on the front. Mr. Seven lowered his eyes in humiliation. Howdy, Mayor, Delphine said happily. Even though Charming considered the Grimms his eternal enemies, Delphine had a soft spot for him. The mayor had helped the family stop Jack the Giant Killer. But most important, he had been kind to Elvis when the big dog was injured. Since then, the little girl had been convinced that deep down, Mayor Charming was one of the good guys. Sheriff, let's make a new law. Children who cannot stay out of the way go to jail, he said through gritted teeth. You're so funny, Delphine said, smiling into the mayor's face. The little girl grabbed Charming's necktie and yanked him down to her level and gave him a smooch on the nose. The anger melted from the man's face, only to be replaced by confusion. He pulled away from the little girl as if he had accidentally touched a hot stove. Principal Hamlin rushed down the hall to join them. Mayor Charming, Sheriff Hampstead, this is such a terrible tragedy. I just want you two to know that the faculty will cooperate in every way we can. I just feel horrible about this. Charming smiled and shook the principal's hand vigorously. I appreciate that, Piper. We'll get to the bottom of this and be out of your hair as soon as possible, he said. I assume you don't have any more of these running around the building. He waved his hand at the girls as if he were trying to shoo away a couple of annoying horseflies. You mean children? The principal said. Oh no, it happened at the end of the day, and most of them were already on their way home. Sheriff, take a look, Charming said, gesturing to the door of Mr. Grumpner's class. The two men tried to enter the room at the same time and got jammed in the doorway together. They squirmed and shoved, but were trapped until Mr. Stevens, 7, came up from behind and pushed them into the room. I thought we weren't going to do that anymore, Mr. Charming said, maintaining his phony smile in front of everyone. Hampstead muttered an apology and immediately took a camera from his pocket. He snapped pictures of the unusual crime scene and Mr. Grumpner's disturbing corpse. He was found about 10 minutes after the last bell, Principal Hamlin offered. I see, said Charming, as he yanked some of the sticky stuff off a desk. The sheriff stepped close to the body to take more photos. He pulled aside a strand of sticky substance to get a better look at Mr. Grumpner's face. Looks like the blood has been drained right out of him. Maybe it was a vampire, Delphine cried. There are no such thing as vampires, Charming muttered. I used to think there was no such thing as you, Sabrina thought. Sheriff, do you have any idea what happened to him? The principal asked. Well, Hampstead said as he put his camera away, if I had to hazard a guess, I'd say... Spiders, Charming interrupted. A whole bunch of spiders murdered him. There are so many cobwebs here, I'd say it took hundreds of spiders to make them. Looks like they came in through the window. Too cold for spiders, the sheriff argued, but when the mayor flashed him an angry look, the portly policeman zipped his lips. And what would the spider's motivation be? Sabrina asked. How should I know? Charming said. Maybe Grumpner stepped on one and its family wanted revenge. Spider revenge? Sabrina asked. I don't hear anyone else with a better theory, Charming snapped. Suddenly the door opened and Granny and Mr. Canis entered the room. Oh, I have a theory, Granny said, scanning the room. It was a monster. Delphine ran to the old woman and wrapped her arms around her. We found something gross, the little girl cried, burying her face into the old woman's bright green dress. Granny bent down and kissed her on the forehead. A monster, Charming growled. You've had some insane theories in the past, Relda, but monsters? You're right, Mayor, the old woman said sarcastically. Freeport Landing has fairies, witches, robots, and men made out of straw. But monsters? Now, I've really lost my marbles. Charming scowled. Well, have your look around. I know I can't stop you. Thank you, Mayor, Granny said. She crossed the room to Sabrina and took her by the hand. Are you okay? Sabrina nodded. Granny patted her on the head and walked over to the broken window. Among the glass was something long and black. The old woman gingerly moved the glass aside with her fingers and plucked the object off the ground. It was a feather. Gentlemen, I believe I have found a clue, she said. Sheriff Hampstead took his feather and eyed it closely. Looks like crow to me, he said. There's a couple more under the windowsill. Canis took a deep sniff of the air. It is crow. They probably blew in with the wind, Charming said, snatching the feather from the sheriff's hand. He tossed it on the floor as if it were meaningless. We found a clue, too, Delphine said proudly. She pointed at the red hand painted on the chalkboard. Hampstead, Charming, Mr. Seven, and Principal Hamlin peered at the red hand closely. Each of them had a worried look on its face. It's just like the one the police found at my parents' abandoned car, Sabrina said. Or maybe it blew in with the wind, too. Charming scowled, rolled his eyes at her. Probably just a prank. A prank? Sabrina and Delphine cried. Mayor Charming, that's the sign of the Scarlet Hand, said Granny. There's no such thing as a Scarlet Hand, he said. Hampstead's done a thorough investigation, and we've concluded that Jack invented the whole thing. Sabrina couldn't believe her ears. Charming knew the Scarlet Hand was real. He had admitted it to the girls, and the shadowy criminal group of ever-afters had approached him. And this was before they heard Jack brag about being a member. Why was he now lying about its existence? Before Sabrina could confront him, the door opened, and Snow White entered. It didn't seem possible, but Miss White was even more beautiful up close. Mayor Charming rushed to block her view of Mr. Grumpner's corpse, but the teacher had already spotted it. So it's true, she gasped. Snow, you shouldn't see this, Charming said softly. I'm fine, Snow White said, but the mayor ignored her. He took her by the hand and led her into the hallway. Sabrina and Delphine shared a glance and pushed through the crowd, eager not to miss a second of this royal soap opera. The mayor pulled the teacher into his arms as if she needed comfort, and for a brief moment she seemed to enjoy it. But then she pulled away. Billy, Miss White said. What did that to him? Trying to put it out of your head, Snow, Charming said. He put his hand on her shoulder and looked deep in her eyes. It was hard to believe that the usually obnoxious mayor could be tender. I've got my best men on it. The others filed out of Grumpner's classroom, and Sheriff Hampstead took a roll of yellow police tape from his jacket. He draped an X over the door to keep anyone from entering. "Snow, I don't want you to get involved in this," the mayor said. The teacher flashed him an irritated look, but then nodded. She turned and bent down, so she was eye level with Sabrina. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Don't worry about me," the little girl answered. "We see this kind of thing all the time." Mayor Channing turned to the sheriff. "Mr. Hampstead, could you make sure my fiancée, I mean Miss White, gets home safely?" he said, blushing over his mistake. As Snow White stood up, she smiled softly, but the bright red blush on her cheeks flushed like a police siren on her pale skin. "I'll be happy to," Sheriff Hampstead said, extending his arm to the beautiful woman. He escorted her down the hall, and she stopped to gaze back at Charming before she left. "So, what's next, Billy?" Sabrina said before she burst into giggles. Delphine and Granny joined her. Even Mr. Canis cracked a smile. Suddenly, a loud, goofy laugh was heard behind them. When they turned, they found Mr. Seven nearly falling over with laughter. "Billy," she continued, "that's just precious. It's so sweet. I'm going to get a cavity." "I think it's romantic," Delphine said, doing her best to stop laughing. "Enough!" Charming shouted, silencing everyone's giggles. "This is a crime scene. Relda, take your rugrats and your mangy mutt mongrel with you, or I'll have you arrested." "Watch your words, Prince," Canis growled as his eyes turned icy blue, showing everyone that the wolf was just below the surface. "Someday you're going to wake up and find someone has taken a bite out of you."